Hello, my name is Maggie, and I am a beloved child of God, and so are you. Power. The word power. What do you feel when you hear the word power? There's a line in one of my favorite movies, The Princess Bride, where a character turns to another character and says, "You keep using that word, but I don't think it means what you think it means." And it's funny. And we use the word power quite often. And even if we're not using the word power, we're thinking about the concept of power and what a powerful person looks like. And looking at our relationship with God and what power looks like and what weakness looks like and what freedom looks like. These are all things that are really appropriate for 4th of July Sunday school and lectionary. It's one of my favorite lectionaries because it reminds me of where to start when I'm looking towards my relationship with God. So our first lesson, we have, King David, hearing about how his reign began, and the people coming to David and saying, "Please lead us. We need you to lead us. We want you, David." And King David, where he's in Jerusalem, which then became the city of David. And King David, who ruled for all of these years over people, over the Jews, so important. King David, so important. It's important to know that David came from the line of Abraham, which was the promise, remember, when God promised Abraham. And so this great, mighty King David. And King David is so incredibly important to us because again and again and again, we talk about the lineage of Jesus, knowing that our Messiah came from the line of King David. So David is important over and over again. Remember what David looked like when we first saw him? How important was David when we first saw him? He wasn't even invited to the dinner. He wasn't even at the dinner where Samuel was trying to find out who God was going to anoint. He didn't even get an invite. David was out with the sheep. That's where David was. David was small and young. He was just a boy, a shepherd. He was nobody, not even invited to the dinner. And we see in stories throughout the Bible that David was not perfect by any means. David made a lot of really big mistakes. David was incredibly human. Because even if you're reading about some of the things that David did that we say, I don't think that was the best choice, you can still identify with maybe why he did it. And we can understand, because we're human too, the things that make us do cause us to maybe choose the wrong thing at the wrong time. So David is a great example for us. He made big mistakes. But here's what's really important about David. He loved God. He loved God so much. Some of the most beautiful poetry about God was written by David and his relationship with God. He loved God so much that when Saul died, he's proclaiming the love of Saul and the sadness and the grief, his lament over the death of Saul. Now, he wasn't a great fan of Saul's. Saul was not a great fan of David's. They weren't buddies, but he laments the death of Saul, and people tell us it's because Saul was chosen by God. And David saw that anything that was chosen by God was worth loving. So the last line in our first lesson, and David became greater and greater, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. So they're telling us how the greatness of David came to be. And he was so big. Why? Because God was with him and he loved God. In our second lesson, we talk about power as well. And this is one of my most favorite verses in the Bible. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. Okay. Power is made perfect in weakness. I want you to hear that. So Paul is writing a letter. It's his second letter to the Corinthians. And he is telling them about his weaknesses. He doesn't say exactly what it is, but he doesn't even really have to, because we're human. Paul was human. In a very human way, he does talk about the weaknesses of Insults. Insult is when somebody says something unkind to you and hurts your feelings. Hardship. A hardship is when circumstances in the situation are not working well for you and it makes it difficult. You can't have a sufficient life to bring you ease and serenity. Persecutions. Persecutions is when you feel like people are against you and they're out to get you a little bit. And it feels a little scary and sad and lonely. And calamity. A calamity is something very terrible that happens that kind of just knocks you down. And you feel like, oh, how am I ever going to get through this? It's such a big tragedy. Well, Paul says that he can live through those. He can live through those because he has Christ. He says, for when I am weak, I am strong. Now, he had just said that he had been praying to God. He prayed to God 3 times, please remove this weakness from me. Please remove this weakness from me. Please remove this weakness from me. And God responded, my grace is sufficient for you. So, no, Paul, I'm not going to remove the weakness. That's what God's response is to Paul, who's trying to lead people to Christ and to God and to show them the light and to show them the love of God and how wonderful it is to be a child of God. God says, no, I'm not going to remove it from you, Paul. My grace is sufficient for you. The love of God, the grace from God to keep loving us unconditionally again and again and again, and to be with us and to hold us is enough. You are enough because you have God with you. And then God says, for power is made perfect in weakness. That's a mind bender, huh? Power is made perfect in weakness. How can that be? They're opposites. How can that be? And this is what I love about our relationship with God. Power and freedom and love come from surrendering to God and being a follower of God and of Jesus. Power is made perfect in weakness. So we're human beings, which means that we have to eat. We have to sleep. We age. We get sick. We die. We're human. We're mortals. God made us to do all those things. God made it so that we have to sleep. God made it so that we have to drink water. We have to eat. We are fully dependent. If you don't eat, if you don't drink water, if you don't sleep, we are fully dependent on the things that we need. We are not all-powerful, self-sufficient, independent, super strong beings. That's not what God made. God made beings that are dependent upon creation, that are dependent upon each other. We need each other's company, and we're dependent upon God. That is powerful relationship. When we can be with God and to surrender. And when you do that, guess what? The insults, the persecutions, the calamities, the hardships, they don't affect you the way they could if you didn't have God with you and by your side and working in you and around you. So choosing God, choosing to surrender and choosing to be a follower of God is the way to true power. And then we have our gospel reading, which is the story about Jesus going home. And Jesus goes home, and so this is Mark. And Mark starts, there's no slowdown in the Gospel of Mark. Mark starts there, when they're around the Sea of Galilee. They have the sea itself is almost like a character in the story, just the big waves, the crashing waves. And they're going from place to place, and there's crowds, and there's throngs, and there's people, and everybody is seeing this Jesus and saying, I got to get to this guy. I got to get to this Jesus. So there's noise. There's so much commotion, and there's people just clamoring to even touch Jesus. If I can just touch Jesus, I just need to get to this Jesus. I mean, he's a rock star. He's going around, and his disciples are with him, and they're on a tour. They're on this rock star tour with this guy Jesus who walks up. He's doing miracles. He's talking about God's love, and you can imagine people just kind of swoon and the way he leaves a town is better than he found it. And they believe in him, and they see him, and they are amazed by him. Now we have a story about Jesus going to a town, where he walks into this town, and the disciples, they're probably like, yeah, here comes Jesus, guys. Y'all get ready for this. And Jesus walks in, and you expect, there's going to be a throng of people, because especially, do you know where Jesus is walking in? He's going to his hometown. He's walking into his hometown where he's from. So you can imagine, they've heard about Jesus. Everybody's heard and said, there's this guy, he's coming home. So you'd think if every single town they go into, people were clamoring to see him and they think he's fabulous, the disciples are thinking, oh, we're going home now. We're going home. And we're really going to get the red carpet treatment now. Well, they walk in and it's silent. There's not a lot of people excited to see Jesus, wanting to just touch his robes to be healed, to hear his words. There's not at all. They're kind of just looking at Jesus and they're like, isn't this Jesus? Like, you remember him? Like, I remember Jesus. I saw his sister yesterday. Who does he think he is? He's not the Messiah. What are you talking about? You're Jesus. I know who you are. You are Jesus. You're a carpenter. You're the son of Mary, which is a really important insult at Jesus. They don't mention Jesus' father, the son of Mary, because remember how Jesus was born? You remember when we hear about Mary finding out that she's going to have a baby and she's not even married yet to Joseph? So, this Jesus, I know where you come from, Jesus. I know you. Stop trying to pretend like you're somebody special. And they don't believe. Every other story where Jesus has gone into a town, we hear about them being amazed. And at this moment, we hear Jesus was amazed at their unbelief. And the next thing he does, he heals some people. He doesn't heal a whole bunch of people. He doesn't perform because they don't believe. And this is a good point, that if you don't believe, then you won't receive the love and the feeling and the healing. You can't. You've blocked it up. They use the word, they're offended by Jesus. And the word offended, when I hear the word offended, again, I don't think it means what you think it means. I hear the word offended and I think, oh, I can't believe that. And it offends my sensibilities and it makes me feel shocked. Well, the word actually means he's a stumbling block. They stumble over him. They can't get over the idea that Jesus, son of Mary, I know his brothers, I know his sisters. Jesus? You ever tell me Jesus is the Messiah? I can't get over that. So they're stumbling over this notion. They can't accept him. So he's rejected. He is rejected by his hometown. And then in our reading, Jesus basically turns to his disciples. He's like, okay, now it's y'all's turn. You go on out. They have just seen him rejected by his hometown. And he turns to them and he's like, okay, y'all go do this now. Have fun. And he says, now when you go, you're not going to take a whole bunch of bags with you. You're not. You're going to take one staff, which maybe it's a long walk and they needed their walking stick. You're going to take your sandals. You're going to take one tunic, because sometimes if people were sitting out, they would be wearing, layers of clothes. So they had multiple clothes. You're not going to take any food. You're not going to. You know why? This is one thing you know what you're going to take. You're going to take your staff. You're going to take your sandals, only one tunic, and y'all are going in pairs, because I know that y'all need each other. Again, God knows our need. God knows that we need other human beings for support and encouragement. And when you're out there, you know what you're going to be doing? You're going to be staying with the people in the hometown. You are going to be knocking on somebody's door and staying with them and dependent upon the hospitality of another person. I don't know about y'all, but I like to be the hostess. I like people to come to my place and let me feed you and let me take care of you and let me help you and let me do all these things. I'm great with that. When I have to turn around and say, where do you keep your towels? Or, you don't have any snacks around here? When you have to be dependent upon somebody else to take care of you, it feels weak. It's a hard thing to do. And that's exactly what Jesus is telling them to do. Go out and be dependent upon these people. And that's how he sends them forth. When we're dependent upon God and we're dependent upon Jesus and we're dependent upon other human beings in our community, that is when we prosper and are powerful. The story of Jesus, our salvation, the fact that we have this covenant and this new relationship with God starts with rejection and ends with rejection. I mean, Mary finds out she's going to have this baby and she's like, how can this be? And then she tells Joseph. She tells Joseph and Joseph's like, no. He thinks, okay, what I'll do is I'll marry her and then I'll divorce her quietly. I don't want to hurt her. I don't want her to go through any real big trouble, but I'm not going to do this. Jesus is rejected by his own earthly father before he's even born. And then what do we find out? Later on, he tells his friends, you're going to reject me. And they're like, no, we won't do that. Well, Judas has already betrayed him. And then he's in the Garden of Gethsemane and says, please stay awake with me. And his friends don't even do that. And then we have where he's taken and the Sanhedrin look at him and say, nope, you are not the Son of God. And then we hear Peter rejecting him 3 times. 3 times. In one night, Peter rejects him. The crowd, when Pilate says, do y'all want to save this guy? And I'll give you, let's crucify Barabbas and y'all can have this guy. And they say, no, give us that thief. We'll take the thief. You take Jesus. Jesus is rejected. Jesus is rejected and he's mocked by the soldiers. And Jesus is crucified, which is a punishment saved for the worst of the worst. He is crucified. He died. He died. Imagine if you were following Jesus and he kept saying he was the Messiah and he was going to save you and he was going to make all things well and you would have freedom and love and you would have eternal life because of him. And he died. And you know some of his disciples were saying, what did we do? Who were we following? What was that all about? And then we have the resurrection. And then we have Jesus coming to them and saying, I am here. All of the rejection is not an accident. This story was crafted by God for us to become human. I love this imagery. I read this where God is like a firework. Have you ever seen professional fireworks? It's a tube. It's just a black tube. There's nothing special about it. You wouldn't even know it was fireworks. It's just this tube. And they light it off. And have you seen fireworks in the sky? How they explode with color and noise and majesty. And I get a little scared of them sometimes. They're so big and bright. And they're amazing. And they say God is like that. The creator of the universe, the creator of the galaxies, the creator of the Grand Canyon and the stars in the sky and beautiful, intricate spider webs and the atoms and cells inside our bodies. The creator of all of that packaged himself into a man who was going to be rejected from before his birth until after he died. He knows what it's like to be human. He knows how you feel when you're sad and you're lonely and you're scared and you're hurt and you're worried and you're tired and you just don't want to do any more. God knows. God knows how it is. And that's the moment. In that moment where you say, I can't do any more. I am weak, is when you turn to God and you open your arms and you open your heart and say, I can't do this. And God looks at you and says, I know. That's what you have me for. And then we are one with God. And you've gotten all of those silly ideas about power and independence and greatness out of your brain. And you can say, I surrender to you, God. I want to be your child and I want to follow you. And that is where you find peace and joy and freedom. I hope that freedom finds you and you find that moment, that sweet spot and that serenity in your relationship with God. And I hope you have a happy 4th of July and you're safe. And you remember everybody else on this 4th of July who may not be safe and may be in hardship and persecutions and troubles themselves. And we can pray that we can be better followers of Jesus, and we can share God's love, and we can look at the people around us who are rejected and persecuted on a daily basis, and we can stand in solidarity with our humankind and know that Jesus didn't send people out one by one because one person can do it on their own. We needed another person. And that's what Jesus is saying to you today. We need each other, and we can be in this together. So happy 4th of July. I love you.